A Hells Angels member played piano with a blind girl, unaware that her mother, a CEO, was behind the door. The late afternoon sun, a weak, diluted gold, struggled to penetrate the grimy windows of the old community center, casting long, lazy shadows across the scuffed linoleum floor. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light, suspended in the quiet air like tiny, forgotten stars. The building itself hummed with a low, almost imperceptible thrum, the distant echo of children's laughter from another wing, the gentle groan of old pipes, the persistent whisper of the ventilation system. It was a place designed for utility, not beauty, where the echoes of countless lives, hopes, and small tragedies lingered in the faded paint and worn wooden trim. Robert, a man whose presence usually commanded attention, even without conscious effort, sat slouched on a hard plastic chair in the waiting area. His leather vest, heavy with patches and pins that told stories of roads traveled and allegiances sworn, creaked faintly with every subtle shift of his broad shoulders. Beneath the vest, a black t-shirt stretched tautly over a formidable frame built from years of hard living and harder riding. Tattoos snaked up his forearms, disappearing beneath the cuffs of his shirt, intricate designs that hinted at a life far removed from the mundane rhythm of a community center. His face, weathered and etched with lines that spoke of sun, wind, and countless unspoken thoughts, was currently set in a neutral expression, his gaze fixed on nothing in particular, yet missing nothing. His long, dark hair, usually tied back, was loose today, falling past his shoulders in a slightly disheveled cascade. He looked, to any casual observer, exactly what he was, a member of the Hells Angels, an enigma in a place of quiet routine. He wasn't there voluntarily, not entirely. A minor legal entanglement, a misunderstanding involving a bar, a broken window, and an overzealous police officer, had led to a mandate for community service. Cleaning, organizing, assisting wherever needed. Today, his task was to help organize the music room, a task he found surprisingly less irritating than he'd anticipated. The room, just down the hall, held an old upright piano, its keys yellowed with age, its soundboard scarred, but still capable of producing a surprisingly rich tone. He'd spent the morning moving stacks of sheet music, wiping down shelves, and generally making himself useful, albeit with an air of quiet efficiency that belied his formidable appearance. Now, as the afternoon drew to a close, he was on a mandated break, waiting for the next segment of his service. He heard the faint, hesitant notes of the piano from the music room. It wasn't a professional sound, not yet. It was the sound of practice, of exploration, of a young hand grappling with the vastness of a keyboard. He found himself listening, an unusual occurrence for a man whose life was often filled with the roar of engines and the clamor of crowds. There was a purity to the sound, a simple, unadorned melody that seemed to cut through the usual noise in his head. A few minutes later, the door to the music room creaked open, and a small figure emerged. It was a girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, her steps tentative but practiced. Her bright, inquisitive face was framed by soft, dark hair that brushed her shoulders. What immediately struck Robert was her eyes. They were wide open, yet unfocused, a beautiful, deep brown that stared ahead without truly seeing. She carried a small white cane, which she tapped gently before her, a rhythmic click-clack against the linoleum. Lily. He'd heard the staff mention her name. She was blind. Lily moved with an innate grace, guided by an internal map and the subtle cues of her environment. She wasn't frail, though her small stature and the delicate way she navigated the space might suggest it. There was a resilience about her, a quiet determination that shone through her every movement. She was accompanied by a young woman, a music therapy assistant named Sarah, who smiled warmly at Robert. "Just taking a quick break, Robert," Sarah said, her voice soft. "Lily's been working hard." Lily turned her head slightly in the direction of Sarah's voice, her lips curving into a shy smile. "I almost got the arpeggios right today," she announced, her voice a clear, bell-like tone. "You certainly did," Sarah affirmed. "Just a few more minutes, then we can try that new piece." As Sarah stepped away to answer a quick call on her mobile phone, Lily, with a surprising burst of independence, turned and slowly made her way back towards the music room. Her cane swept in gentle arcs, tapping, sensing, guiding. Robert watched, a flicker of something he couldn't quite name passing through his eyes. He was used to the raw, the brutal, the unvarnished truth of the streets. This innocent, vulnerable determination was a different kind of truth. Lily reached the doorframe, her fingers exploring the cool wood, then located the doorknob. She pushed the door open, the old hinges groaning softly in protest, and disappeared inside. The piano notes resumed, this time a more confident, though still evolving, rendition of a simple classical melody. It was Pachelbel's canon, or at least a simplified version of it. The familiar, soothing progression, played with a child's earnestness, filled the corridor. Robert found himself slowly rising from his chair. His leather creaked again, a sound that usually announced his intentions with authority. Today, it felt almost apologetic. He walked towards the music room, his heavy boots making surprisingly little noise on the linoleum. He didn't know why he was going. Curiosity, perhaps. Or perhaps it was the music, a siren song pulling him in. He stopped just outside the open door, leaning against the frame, a silent sentinel. Lily sat on the piano bench, her small back straight, her fingers dancing tentatively over the keys. Her head was tilted slightly, as though she were listening not just with her ears, but with her entire being. She was completely absorbed, lost in the world of sound she was creating. Her concentration was absolute, a tiny, self-contained universe of melody. Robert watched her, his gaze softening almost imperceptibly. He noticed the way her brow furrowed slightly when she missed a note, the small, triumphant smile that graced her lips when she found the right chord. He had never been particularly musical, not in any formal sense. But he'd spent enough time in bars, heard enough jukeboxes, enough live bands, to appreciate the raw power of music. And he'd grown up in a house where an old, out-of-tune upright piano sat in the corner, a relic of a grandmother he barely remembered. Sometimes, when he was a boy and his parents were fighting, he'd sneak to that piano, press a few keys, and find a fleeting moment of escape in the discordant sounds. He taught himself a few simple chords, mostly blues progressions, during lonely teenage nights. Nothing sophisticated, just enough to coax a mournful tune out of the old instrument. He stood there for a long moment, simply observing. The music room was sparse, functional. A few posters of famous composers adorned the walls, a metronome sat on a nearby table, and stacks of sheet music lay neatly organized on shelves he had just cleaned. The air smelled faintly of old paper and wood polish. Lily finished a passage, her hands pausing over the keys. She took a deep breath, then started again, the same melody, trying to perfect a tricky transition. This time, she stumbled on a chord, her fingers hitting two notes that clashed jarringly. A small sigh escaped her lips. Without thinking, Robert pushed himself off the doorframe. His boots made a soft thud as he stepped into the room. Lily, sensing the shift in the air, froze, her hands hovering above the keys. Her head turned towards the sound, her sightless eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Hello?" she asked, her voice a little wavery. Robert hesitated. He hadn't intended to make his presence known. He usually preferred to remain in the shadows, an observer. But something about her vulnerability, her small, searching face, compelled him to respond. "It's Robert," he said, his voice a low rumble, perhaps a little gruffer than he intended. He tried to soften it. From earlier. The guy cleaning." Lily relaxed slightly, a faint smile returning. "Oh, hello, Robert. Did you like my playing?" she asked, her tone hopeful. "It was good," he said, moving slowly towards the piano, conscious of his size, his intimidating appearance. He didn't want to scare her. "That's Pachelbel, right?" Lily's smile brightened. "Yes. My teacher says it's a good piece to practice technique. Do you play?" Robert stopped a few feet from the piano. He looked at the keys, then at Lily. "A little," he admitted, a rare note of humility in his voice. "Nothing fancy. Just some old blues." "Blues?" she repeated, a new curiosity in her voice. "I don't think I've ever heard blues on a piano. My teacher mostly teaches classical." He approached the bench, careful not to make any sudden movements. "It's different," he said. He glanced at the empty space beside her on the bench. It was wide enough for two. A strange impulse, one he hadn't felt in years, tugged at him. He found himself sitting down, slowly, carefully, on the bench next to her. The wood creaked under his weight. Lily shifted slightly, her small arm brushing against his leather-clad bicep. She didn't flinch. His large hand, usually gripping handlebars or a wrench, hovered over the keys. He could feel the vibrations of the piano beneath his fingertips. The scent of old wood and faint dust filled his nostrils. He looked at Lily's small, delicate fingers, poised above the ivory and ebony. "Mind if I show you something?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost a murmur. Lily's face broke into a wide, genuine smile. "Oh, yes. Please." He gently moved her left hand slightly to the side, then placed his own, much larger, calloused hand on the lower octaves. He pressed a low, resonant C, then an F, then a G, a simple, foundational blues progression. The sound was deep, mournful, yet undeniably soulful. He played a basic walking bassline, letting the rhythm establish itself. Lily listened intently, her head tilted, a look of pure wonder on her face. "That's different," she breathed. "It sounds like a story." "It is," Robert said, his gaze fixed on his moving fingers, a faint, almost forgotten memory stirring within him. "Every note tells one." He continued the bass line with his left hand, a steady, rhythmic pulse. Then, with his right hand, he began to improvise a simple, melancholic melody in the higher register. It wasn't technically brilliant, but it was honest, raw, tinged with a lifetime of experience. The notes seemed to weep and soar in equal measure, a testament to joy and sorrow, loss and resilience. He played a familiar 12-bar blues, letting the story unfold through the music. Lily, still listening, slowly, tentatively, began to move her own right hand. Guided by the rhythm and the melody Robert was creating, she found a high C, then a D, then an E, simple notes that harmonized unexpectedly with his deeper, more complex chords. She wasn't playing a structured part, but rather adding her own innocent, intuitive counterpoint, a delicate, almost ethereal layer to his earthy blues. It was an accidental duet, two disparate souls finding common ground in the universal language of music. A small smile, one that hadn't graced his lips in years, tugged at the corner of Robert's mouth. He looked at Lily, whose face was radiant with concentration and pure, unadulterated joy. Her blindness, her smallness, his imposing presence, the world outside, all of it faded away, leaving only the music, the shared moment, the unexpected connection. He adjusted his playing slightly, subtly incorporating her simple notes, weaving them into the fabric of the blues, making space for her, encouraging her. They played like that for what felt like an eternity, though in reality it was only a few minutes. The old piano, usually reserved for structured lessons, sang a new, unexpected song, a blend of grit and innocence, darkness and light. Robert, the Hell's Angel, found a quiet peace he rarely experienced, his rough exterior momentarily shed, replaced by the focused intensity of a musician. Lily, the blind girl, discovered a new dimension of sound, an unexpected companion in her musical journey. Meanwhile, just down the corridor, Eleanor Vance, CEO of a burgeoning tech startup, walked with a hurried, determined stride. Her tailored power suit, a sharp charcoal gray, moved with the precision of her every step. Her designer handbag, clutched firmly in her hand, contained not just her phone and wallet, but the weight of 1,000 responsibilities, deadlines, and strategic decisions. Her mind was a whirlwind of data, market analyses, and investor calls. She had just left a particularly grueling board meeting, the echoes of a heated debate still reverberating in her thoughts. Every minute of her day was meticulously scheduled, every task accounted for. But one appointment was sacred, inviolable, picking up Lily from her music therapy session. She always made time, even if it meant pushing other critical engagements to the brink of impossibility. Lily was her world, her anchor, the one pure, uncomplicated joy in a life of relentless ambition and constant pressure. As she approached the music room, a faint, unfamiliar melody reached her ears. It wasn't the usual classical pieces Lily practiced, nor the cheerful, simple tunes often played during therapy sessions. This was different. Deeper. More soulful. It was a blues melody, undeniably, unmistakably. Eleanor paused, her brow furrowing slightly. She wasn't aware that the center offered blues lessons. And who was playing it? It sounded surprisingly good, with a rich, full tone. She quickened her pace, a flicker of concern touching her. Lily was sensitive, easily overwhelmed by new sounds or unexpected changes. Eleanor pushed open the door to the music room, slowly, quietly, not wanting to interrupt. She peered around the edge of the doorframe, her eyes adjusting to the subdued light within. And then she saw them. Her breath caught in her throat. Her meticulously ordered world seemed to tilt on its axis. There, seated at the piano, next to her precious Lily, was a man. A very large man. A man whose back was a canvas of dark leather and patches, whose long hair cascaded over his broad shoulders, whose very posture exuded a raw, untamed energy. The tattoos on his visible arm, snaking up from beneath his sleeve, were clear even from her vantage point. He was undeniably, unmistakably, a Hell's Angel. Her daughter, Lily, her blind, innocent Lily, sat beside him, her small fingers dancing over the keys, her face alight with a joy that Eleanor rarely saw, a pure, uninhibited delight. They were playing together, a strange, beautiful, improbable duet. The deep, resonant blues from the imposing man intertwined with Lily's light, almost ethereal notes, creating a harmony that was both jarring and profoundly moving. Eleanor stood frozen, a silent, unseen witness. Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical, struggled to process the scene before her. Fear, protectiveness, disbelief, and a strange, unexpected awe warred within her. The man, a figure of potential danger, an emblem of a world she meticulously shielded Lily from, was making music with her daughter, a melody of shared connection that transcended all her preconceived notions. He was unaware of her presence, completely absorbed in the moment, his head slightly bowed, his powerful hands coaxing a gentle, expressive tune from the old instrument. Eleanor stood frozen, a silent, unseen witness. Her mind, usually so sharp and analytical, struggled to process the scene before her. Fear, protectiveness, disbelief, and a strange, unexpected awe warred within her. The man, a figure of potential danger, an emblem of a world she meticulously shielded Lily from, was making music with her daughter, a melody of shared connection that transcended all her preconceived notions. He was unaware of her presence, completely absorbed in the moment, his head slightly bowed, his powerful hands coaxing a gentle, expressive tune from the old instrument. The unexpected harmony continued, a beautiful, fragile bridge between two worlds that should never have met. Robert's powerful hands, surprisingly agile, moved with a practiced ease, weaving a rich tapestry of blues. Lily, guided by instinct and the rhythm Robert provided, added her delicate, almost ethereal notes, like sprinkles of starlight on a dark, soulful canvas. Her small face was alight with a joy that Eleanor rarely saw, a pure, uninhibited delight that made her heart ache with a complex mix of fear and tenderness. This was her daughter, her blind, innocent Lily, finding an unexpected connection with a man who, by all appearances, represented everything Eleanor fought against. A small, almost imperceptible smile played on Robert's lips, a rare sight that softened the rugged contours of his face. He leaned slightly closer to Lily, his broad shoulder a silent, comforting presence beside her. He adjusted his playing, subtly incorporating her simple notes, making space for her, encouraging her without a single word. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated musical communion, a testament to the universal language that transcended social divides, age differences, and even the stark contrast of their lives. Eleanor watched, a silent battle raging within her. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to intervene, to snatch Lily away from this imposing stranger. Her corporate mind, trained to assess risks and identify threats, flagged him as an immediate and severe danger. His leather vest, the patches, the tattoos, they were all stark symbols of a life she deemed unsuitable, even harmful, for her daughter. Yet, the music, the sheer, unadulterated joy on Lily's face, held her captive. She couldn't deny the profound connection unfolding before her, the gentle patience in the man's movements, the unexpected tenderness in his playing. It was a paradox that shredded her carefully constructed worldview. The last notes of their impromptu duet faded into the quiet air of the music room, leaving behind a lingering resonance, a palpable sense of peace. Robert's hands rested on the keys, his gaze still on Lily, a silent acknowledgement of their shared moment. Lily, her head tilted, a beatific smile on her face, slowly lifted her small hands, then let them fall softly onto her lap. "That was wonderful, Robert," she breathed, her voice a soft whisper filled with awe. "It was like flying." Robert's deep voice, surprisingly gentle, broke the silence. "Yeah, kid. It kinda was." He turned his head slightly, as if sensing a shift in the air, a subtle change in the room's atmosphere. His eyes, dark and perceptive, swept towards the open door. Eleanor knew she couldn't remain hidden any longer. The moment of grace had passed, replaced by the stark reality of her presence. She pushed the door open fully, stepping into the room, her designer heels clicking softly on the linoleum, a sharp, intrusive sound that shattered the delicate quiet. Robert's head snapped towards her, his expression instantly transforming. The faint smile vanished, replaced by a guarded neutrality, his eyes narrowing slightly, assessing. He recognized the tailored suit, the crisp, authoritative aura. He'd seen enough powerful women in his life to know the type. Lily, her sensitive ears picking up the distinct sound of her mother's approach, turned her head, her face breaking into a wide, delighted smile. "Mommy! You're here," she exclaimed, her voice bright with unshadowed joy. She slid off the piano bench, her small white cane tapping lightly as she moved towards the sound of Eleanor's voice. "Lily, my darling," Eleanor said, her voice a little strained, a carefully modulated calm masking the turmoil within. She knelt, embracing her daughter tightly, burying her face in Lily's soft hair, inhaling the comforting scent of her child. She held Lily for a moment longer than necessary, a silent reassurance, a protective embrace. Over Lily's shoulder, her gaze met Robert's, cold and unwavering. Robert remained seated at the piano, his broad frame filling the bench, his powerful hands still resting on the keys. He watched the exchange, his face unreadable. He knew that look. The judgment, the suspicion, the immediate categorization. He'd lived with it his entire life. Eleanor slowly straightened, keeping Lily close to her side. Her eyes, usually warm and expressive, were now sharp, scrutinizing. "And you must be Robert," she stated, her tone devoid of warmth, more an accusation than an introduction. Robert pushed himself off the bench, the leather of his vest creaking, the sound amplified in the suddenly tense silence of the room. He towered over Eleanor, his presence commanding, yet he made no aggressive move. He simply stood, his hands loosely at his sides, his gaze steady. "That's right," he rumbled, his voice deeper now, less gentle than it had been with Lily. "And you're Lily's mother." "Eleanor Vance," she supplied, her chin lifting slightly, an unconscious gesture of defiance and authority. "CEO of Vance Technologies." She watched him for any reaction, any sign of intimidation or recognition. He merely blinked, his expression remaining impassive. "I wasn't aware that the community center offered impromptu blues lessons during therapy sessions." The implication hung heavy in the air, a thinly veiled accusation of impropriety. Robert's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It wasn't a lesson," he said, his voice flat. "Just playing." "Playing," Eleanor repeated, her gaze sweeping over his leather vest, the patches, the tattoos that snaked up his neck. Her eyes lingered on the Hell's Angels emblem, a flicker of disgust passing through them. "With my daughter. My blind daughter." The words were laced with a protectiveness so fierce it bordered on hostility. Lily, sensing the shift in her mother's tone, tugged gently on Eleanor's hand. "Mommy, Robert was very nice. He showed me a new kind of music. It was really beautiful." Her innocent voice, full of enthusiasm, seemed to cut through the tension like a fragile beam of light. Eleanor glanced down at Lily, her expression softening for a fraction of a second, then hardening again as she looked back at Robert. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Lily," she said, her voice still strained. To Robert, she continued, "While I'm sure you meant no harm, Mr. Robert, I find it highly inappropriate for an unauthorized individual to engage with a child in such a manner, especially one as vulnerable as Lily, during what is supposed to be a supervised therapy session. Her CEO voice was fully engaged now, cool, controlled, and utterly dismissive. Robert's dark eyes flashed, a spark of resentment igniting within them. He was used to being judged, but to be spoken to as if he were a common criminal, or worse, a threat to a child he had just shared a moment of pure connection with, pricked a raw nerve. "I'm here doing community service," he stated, his voice low, a dangerous edge creeping into it. "My task this morning was organizing this room. I was on a break. Lily came in. She was playing. I sat down. We played. No harm intended, and certainly no harm done." He emphasized the last phrase, his gaze challenging her. "Community service," Eleanor scoffed, a faint, disbelieving sound escaping her lips. "For what, if I may ask? A parking ticket?" Her tone dripped with sarcasm, a clear indication of her preconceived notions about him. His eyes narrowed further. He considered telling her to mind her own business, or perhaps something far less polite, but Lily was still there, clutching her mother's hand, her innocent face turned towards them, trying to follow the conversation. He bit back the retort. "That's between me and the courts," he said, his voice clipped. "It has nothing to do with your daughter." "It has everything to do with my daughter," Eleanor countered, stepping slightly in front of Lily, a clear barrier. "I am responsible for her safety and well-being. And frankly, Mr. Robert, your appearance and affiliations do not inspire confidence. I expect the staff here to ensure a safe environment for all children, and that includes vetting anyone who comes into contact with them." The accusation was unmistakable. Robert felt a familiar anger simmer beneath his calm exterior. He had dealt with this prejudice his entire life. The assumptions, the immediate condemnation based on his cut, his ink, his club. But this was different. This wasn't some bar owner or a cop on a power trip. This was a mother, protective and fierce, and he had been playing with her child. "I didn't lay a hand on her, other than to show her a chord on the piano," Robert said, his voice strained with suppressed fury. "She was happy. She was enjoying herself. You saw it." He gestured vaguely towards the piano, as if the instrument itself could attest to the truth of his words. Eleanor didn't waver. "And I also saw a man I know nothing about, a man with a clear history of questionable associations, engaging with my blind daughter without supervision or explicit permission. My concern is not about what you did, Mr. Robert, but what you could have done, or what impression you might leave." Just then, the music therapy assistant, Sarah, returned, her mobile phone still in hand, a look of mild concern on her face. She took in the tense scene, the towering Hell's Angel, the formidable CEO, and Lily caught between them. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her voice tentative. Eleanor immediately turned to Sarah, her expression one of barely contained indignation. "Sarah, I would like an explanation. Why was this man," she gestured dismissively towards Robert, "alone with Lily in this room? And why was he permitted to interact with her in this manner?" Sarah, a young woman in her mid-20s, looked flustered. She glanced at Robert, then back at Eleanor. "Ms. Vance, I just stepped out for a moment to take an urgent call. Robert was here earlier, organizing the sheet music. He's doing community service, assigned by the center director. He's been very helpful, very quiet." She trailed off, clearly uncomfortable caught between the two formidable personalities. "I didn't think, he seemed perfectly harmless." "Harmless?" Eleanor's voice rose slightly, losing a fraction of its controlled composure. "Sarah, look at him. His very presence is intimidating. And his affiliations are a matter of public record. I trust the center to provide a safe and professional environment for Lily, not to expose her to individuals like this." Robert let out a low, humorless chuckle, a sound that grated on Eleanor's nerves. "Individuals like this," he repeated, his eyes fixed on her. "You have no idea who I am, lady. You just see the leather and the patches, and you make up your mind." "I see enough," Eleanor snapped, her patience wearing thin. I see a man who represents a lifestyle that is antithetical to everything I want for my daughter. I see someone who should not be alone with children, especially not in a therapeutic setting. She turned back to Sarah, her voice firm. I expect a full report on the center's vetting procedures, and I will be speaking with the director about this incident. This is simply unacceptable. Lily, sensing the growing anger, began to whimper softly, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Mommy, please. Robert was just playing music with me. He was kind. Eleanor knelt again, pulling Lily into a tight hug, her gaze still flicking protectively towards Robert. It's all right, sweetie. Mommy's just making sure you're safe. Robert watched the scene, a strange mix of anger and something akin to sorrow churning within him. He saw the genuine fear in Eleanor's eyes, the fierce love for her child. He understood it, in a way. He also saw the walls she had built around herself, around Lily, walls of judgment and prejudice. He had offered a moment of unexpected connection, a shared piece of his soul through music, and it had been met with suspicion and condemnation. He pushed himself away from the piano, taking a step back, creating more distance. Look, I get it, he said, his voice rough. You don't want me near your kid. Fine. Consider it done. He looked at Sarah. My shift's over, right? I'm out. He didn't wait for a response. With a final, lingering glance at Lily, whose small, blind face was now etched with a confused sadness, Robert turned and walked towards the door. His heavy boots made surprisingly little sound on the linoleum, but his presence, his coiled energy, filled the space even as he departed. Eleanor watched him go, a knot of conflicting emotions in her chest. Relief that he was leaving, but also a lingering unease, a sense that she had perhaps, in her fierce protectiveness, extinguished a small, unexpected flame of joy for her daughter. The music room, which moments ago had resonated with an unlikely harmony, now felt cold and silent, the old piano a mute witness to the lingering tension. The music room, which moments ago had resonated with an unlikely harmony, now felt cold and silent, the old piano a mute witness to the lingering tension. Eleanor stood, clutching Lily's hand, a tempest of emotions raging within her. Relief that Robert was gone mingled with a gnawing doubt, a small, insistent voice questioning her harshness. Lily's soft whimper, her innocent plea, echoed in Eleanor's ears. She had protected her daughter, yes, but at what cost to Lily's fleeting happiness? Mommy, why did Robert leave? Lily's voice was small, laced with confusion and a hint of accusation. He was so nice. He played beautiful music. Eleanor knelt again, her embrace tighter this time, a desperate attempt to quell the rising tide of uncertainty. He had to go, sweetie. He finished his work here for the day. It was a half-truth, and it tasted bitter on her tongue. She knew he had left because of her words, her judgment. Sarah, the music therapy assistant, cleared her throat, her face etched with discomfort. Ms. Vance, Robert is actually a very quiet and respectful individual. He's been nothing but helpful during his community service. I truly believe he meant no harm. Eleanor straightened, her gaze still fixed on the doorway where Robert had disappeared. Harmless or not, Sarah, his presence here, especially unsupervised with a child, is a clear breach of protocol. I will be speaking with the director first thing tomorrow morning. Her tone was firm, but it lacked the unwavering conviction it had held moments before. She took Lily's hand, guiding her towards the door. Come on, Lily. Let's go home. As they walked through the community center's quiet corridors, Lily remained subdued, her small white cane tapping a mournful rhythm against the linoleum. Eleanor usually cherished these moments, the quiet walk with her daughter, a rare pause in her frantic schedule. Today, the silence was heavy, filled with unspoken questions and the faint, haunting echo of a blues melody. That night, Eleanor found herself pacing her luxurious penthouse apartment, the city lights a distant, indifferent glitter outside her floor-to-ceiling windows. Lily was asleep, a tear-stained pillow beside her. Eleanor had tried to distract her with stories, with her favorite audiobooks, but Lily's usual effervescence was gone, replaced by a quiet, persistent longing. I miss the blues, she had whispered before drifting off. Eleanor replayed the scene in the music room, her words, Robert's impassive face, the sudden, quiet anger in his eyes. She prided herself on her ability to make swift, decisive judgments, to assess risks and protect her interests. But had she been fair? Had she seen the man, or merely the uniform, the tattoos, the stereotype? The image of Robert's powerful hands, surprisingly gentle, coaxing a soulful tune from the piano, juxtaposed with Lily's radiant, uninhibited joy, gnawed at her. She had never seen Lily so completely absorbed, so utterly delighted by music before. The next morning, Eleanor, despite her initial resolve to demand Robert's removal, found herself hesitant. She called the community center director, Mr. Henderson, a man known for his calm demeanor and deep commitment to the community. "Ms. Vance," Mr. Henderson said, his voice measured, "I understand your concerns. We take the safety of our children very seriously. Robert is here as part of a court-mandated community service. He underwent a thorough background check, as does everyone who works or volunteers here. His offense was a minor altercation, a bar fight, no assault, no harm to individuals, mostly property damage. He's been nothing but exemplary in his service. In fact, he's been remarkably efficient and quiet. We've had no complaints, quite the opposite." Eleanor listened, her grip on the phone tightening. "But his appearance, Mr. Henderson. His affiliations. They are unsettling. We judge people on their actions within these walls, Ms. Vance," Henderson replied, a subtle note of firmness entering his voice. "And Robert's actions here have been beyond reproach. He cleaned and organized the music room to perfection, something no one else has managed in years. And as for his interaction with Lily, Sarah assured me it was entirely innocent, a shared moment over the piano. Lily was, apparently, quite delighted." The director's words, coupled with Lily's continued quiet sadness, chipped away at Eleanor's certainty. She ended the call, promising to consider their conversation. For the first time in a long time, Eleanor Vance, the formidable CEO, felt profoundly unsure of herself. Meanwhile, Robert had returned to his world, the roar of his motorcycle a familiar balm against the sting of Eleanor's words. He rode for hours, the wind whipping through his long hair, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. He was used to being judged, to the wary glances and the unspoken condemnations. It was part of the life he had chosen, a badge of defiance. But Lily had seen past all of that. She had just seen the music. And he, in turn, had seen a pure, unblemished joy that had touched something dormant within him. He remembered the feel of her small, delicate fingers on the keys, the way her head tilted, completely lost in the sound. He missed the unexpected harmony they had created. He still had weeks of community service left, but he requested a change of duties, a different wing of the center, far from the music room. He didn't want to risk another confrontation, another accusation. He simply wanted to finish his time and disappear back into the anonymity of the road. Days turned into a week. Lily's music lessons continued, but her teacher noted a lack of enthusiasm. She practiced her classical pieces diligently, but the spark, the unadulterated joy, was missing. Eleanor noticed it too. Lily would often pause, her small hands hovering over the keys, a wistful expression on her face. "I wish Robert was here," she'd say softly. "He knew a different kind of music." Eleanor wrestled with her conscience. She saw her daughter's quiet longing, a direct consequence of her own actions. Her protective instincts were still strong, but they were now tempered by a growing sense of guilt and the undeniable evidence of Lily's unhappiness. She had always prided herself on being rational, on making data-driven decisions. And the data, in this case, was Lily's profound sadness. One afternoon, a week after the incident, Eleanor found herself back at the community center, ostensibly to pick up Lily from her session, but with a different agenda simmering beneath the surface. She walked past the music room, where the familiar sound of classical scales drifted out. She didn't see Robert. She knew he had been reassigned. As she rounded a corner, she saw him. Robert was in the community garden, a neglected patch of land behind the center that staff had been trying to revive for years. He was shirtless, his heavily tattooed back glistening with sweat under the late afternoon sun. He wielded a shovel with surprising grace, turning over stubborn earth, his powerful muscles rippling with the effort. Around him, the previously overgrown weeds were gone, replaced by neat rows of tilled soil. He worked with a quiet intensity, his long hair tied back today, revealing the strong lines of his weathered face. He looked, if anything, even more formidable in this setting, yet there was a deep sense of purpose in his movements, a quiet dedication that was impossible to ignore. Eleanor watched him for a long moment, unseen, from the shadow of the doorway. She saw not a threat, but a man working hard, transforming a barren patch of land into something fertile and promising. She remembered Mr. Henderson's words, "We judge people on their actions within these walls." And Robert's actions were undeniably positive, constructive. A wave of shame washed over her. She had judged him, not on his actions, but on his appearance, on the superficial trappings of his life. She had let her fear, her preconceived notions, dictate her response, and in doing so, had deprived her daughter of a moment of pure, unexpected joy. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor stepped out of the shadows. Her heels clicked softly on the pavement, a sound that carried across the quiet garden. Robert paused, leaning on his shovel, and turned. His eyes, dark and assessing, met hers. There was no surprise, no immediate anger, just a neutral, guarded expression. "Mr. Robert," Eleanor began, her voice a little softer than she intended, a rare tremor of vulnerability in her tone. He simply nodded, waiting. I want to apologize," she said, the words feeling foreign and heavy on her tongue. It was not often that Eleanor Vance apologized. "For my behavior the other day. I was overly protective. And I made assumptions." She gestured vaguely towards his tattoos, his vest, then to the tilled earth around him. "I saw what I expected to see, not what was actually there." Robert remained silent for a beat, his gaze steady, searching. Then, a faint, almost imperceptible softening around his eyes. "You're Lily's mother," he said, his voice a low rumble, devoid of the harshness she expected. "I understand. You want to keep her safe." "Yes," Eleanor admitted, a sigh escaping her. "But I also want her to be happy. And she hasn't been, not since you left the music room." She paused, then took another step closer. "She misses the music you played with her. The blues." A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps a fleeting tenderness, crossed Robert's face. "The kid's got good ears," he murmured, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "She does," Eleanor agreed, a small, genuine smile finally gracing her own lips. "And she loved playing with you. It was beautiful, what you created together." She took another deep breath. Would you consider playing with her again? If she wanted to, of course. And with supervision, naturally." She felt a blush creep up her neck, acknowledging the irony of her last statement. Robert looked from Eleanor to the raw earth beneath his feet, then back to her. He saw not the formidable CEO now, but a mother, humbled and vulnerable, seeking to rectify a mistake for her child's happiness. He remembered the pure, unadulterated joy on Lily's face, the unexpected connection they had forged. "I'm still doing my service here," he said, his voice thoughtful. "And I got no problem with playing a little music. If the kid wants to." A wave of relief washed over Eleanor. "Thank you, Robert. Truly. It would mean the world to her." The next day, Lily was back at the piano, her small hands navigating the keys with renewed purpose. Eleanor sat quietly in the corner, observing. After a few minutes, Robert entered the room, his leather vest replaced by a simple, clean t-shirt, his hair neatly tied back. He still cut an imposing figure, but Eleanor no longer saw a threat. She saw a man who had been unfairly judged, a man capable of unexpected kindness and profound connection. Lily, hearing his steps, turned, her face lighting up with a brilliant smile. "Robert. You came back." "Hey, kid," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. He nodded a silent greeting to Eleanor, who returned it with a small, grateful smile. He sat down on the piano bench next to Lily, just as he had before. "Can we play the blues again?" Lily asked, her voice brimming with excitement. Robert smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that transformed his rugged face. Yeah, kid. We can play the blues. His large, calloused hands settled on the lower octaves, and the deep, soulful notes of a blues progression filled the room. Lily, her small fingers poised, listened intently, then tentatively joined in, adding her light, intuitive counterpoint. The old piano sang, once again, a blend of grit and innocence, darkness and light, a testament to the unexpected harmonies that could emerge when prejudice was set aside, and hearts were open to connection. Eleanor watched, a profound sense of peace settling over her. She realized that sometimes, the greatest lessons came from the most unexpected teachers, and that true strength lay not in rigid protection, but in the courage to see beyond appearances, to embrace the shared humanity that bound them all. The music room, once a place of tension, now vibrated with a melody of understanding, a fragile, beautiful bridge built by two unlikely souls, and witnessed by a mother whose world had just expanded. Lily's laughter, clear and joyful, intermingled with the mournful, soulful notes, a perfect, improbable duet.